comb these. I read them obsessively. I'm constantly dreaming up lists of all the places I would love to go. And having read the link you sent through about Djibouti, it's on my list.
Sandy beaches along the Red Sea, salt lakes, volcanic fields. Brent Thomas is the Commercial Director at House of Travel, joining us now. Good afternoon, Brent.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Cost is the issue for us way down here, isn't it? And where can Kiwis go, Brent, aside from the usual places like up to the islands, that won't cost families an arm or a leg?
Well, we're certainly seeing a lot of New Zealanders expand beyond just Australia and the South Pacific, as you talk about. And there's no doubt about it, Southeast Asia is certainly a place that New Zealanders are travelling to in record numbers, and that's because of the value and the number of carriers coming into New Zealand.
What's the big deal with Laos at the moment? That's popular, isn't it?
Yeah, it is popular, but not on its own. So typically people go there having incorporated somewhere else like, say, Vietnam, Cambodia, northern Thailand, or a combination thereof. It's simply because you have to go to somewhere to get to there, so if that makes sense. So you typically stop somewhere else and spend 7 to 10 days in some place and then go across there for a few days. So again, it's that unexplored place. It's one of those sort of things that when you come back and having a dinner party, you can discuss it and go, well, I've been here, and people are really genuinely interested because it's something different.
Okay, that explains that package of Southeast Asia nicely. I suppose somewhere like Djibouti would be cheap when you get there, but getting there may not be cheap.
Absolutely correct. It is for people who don't know, near Somalia and over that way by the Red Sea. So it's certainly a long way away. And that's the thing about New Zealand. We are down the bottom of the earth from that perspective. But so therefore, it does make it expensive to get to some places. However, we are very blessed with only less than 5 million people in this country that we have nearly 30 airlines who fly here. So there's plenty of choices to get to many destinations.
So how would I get to Djibouti?
Well, that's a good question, actually, and honestly, truthfully, we have so few people off the top of my head, I don't even specifically know the answer to that. But we know you would have to go through somewhere like the Middle East is probably the easiest place to get through down into Africa there.
Yeah.
Okay. Brent, thank you very much for joining us. It's interesting, Djibouti. The more you read about it, the more you think, it'd be nice to go there. And just the last question, because we have a new government tomorrow officially, and it'll focus on more money for DOC and cleaning up our waterways and reducing our carbon footprint and planting native trees. In terms of our tourism and our percentage of pureness, both of you, not before time? We have to watch out for this, don't we, in terms of people wanting to come here?
Yeah, and making sure that it's high-value tourism. Part of the problem is that tourism is not generating an enormous number of high-value jobs, lots of minimum wage jobs, and as we've found with some areas, stressing infrastructure, and it's expensive infrastructure. So it'd be nice to have the high-value ones and not to be completely flooded and get some real value out of it. The danger, too, is that we kill the golden goose. We become less than 100% pure with everyone crowded in.
When was that again, that 100% purity? Tracy, last word from you.
Yeah, just to have those high-value visitors, that we've got to make sure our offering stays really high value, and that is around taking care of our environment.
Great to have you on, Tracy. Nice to talk with you again on the panel.
And you as well.
Bernard Hickey, always a pleasure to see you too.
Cheers, and cheers to you, Tracy.
To you too, Bernard.
So you two go way back.
We sure do.
That's us for another day. Thank you for your company, everybody. And coming up, Checkpoint as usual with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint we take a closer look at Prime Minister-designate Jacinda Ardern's new cabinet lineup. Soon to be Finance Minister Grant Robertson joins us live. We'll ask him how many suitcases he's carrying. The National Party cops a $600,000 fine after losing its high-profile copyright case involving the American rapper Eminem. We talk to the publisher of that Lose Yourself song and to a copyright expert who sings it to us. It's rather wonderful. Also tonight, the Southern DHB announces weekend mega clinics to clear a backlog of 569 urology patients who've been waiting longer than they should have for treatment. And we talk to a man who had prostate cancer. He wasn't treated. It's now secondary and in his liver.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The National Party is suing the company that provided music for a 2014 election campaign ad. The High Court has found the party breached copyright by using music copied from Eminem's song Lose Yourself and has ordered it to pay damages of $600,000. Eric Frickberg reports.
National said it bought the music, called Eminem-esque, from a company in Australia that in turn had bought it from the US. In her judgment, Justice Carl says not only does the music sound like Lose Yourself, it was intended to. She says the undeniable inference is that its composer had Lose Yourself in front of him at the time of composition. National's president Peter Goodfellow says the party had sought assurances from industry professionals that the track could be legally used, and it's preparing legal action of its own. This is Eric Frickberg.
Child poverty, housing and economic development have emerged as a strong focus for ministers in the new government. The new Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has brought housing back into one portfolio under Phil Twyford after the last government split it between three ministers.
Mr Twyford will be working alongside the Minister for Building and Construction, Jenny Salise, an Auckland-based MP who, equally working across South Auckland, has an acute interest, understanding and empathy around the housing issue. She also holds an associate role, so together both Jenny Salise and Phil Twyford will be delivering what is a very ambitious building program.
Jacinda Ardern will herself be the minister responsible for child poverty reduction, while New Zealand First's Shane Jones takes regional economic development. The convicted double murderer David Tamihere says the sentencing of a man who gave false evidence against him is the latest piece of the Crown case to crumble away. Mr Tamihere, who's on parole, was speaking outside the High Court in Auckland today, where a man known as Witness C was sentenced to jail for 8 years and 7 months for perjury. Witness C told Mr Tamihere's trial that Mr Tamihere had confessed to him that he had sexually abused and killed Swedish tourists Heidi Pakkanen and Sven Hoglund. Mr Tamihere has always maintained his innocence.
Since I've been convicted, the Crown's case just keeps falling apart. Well, bits and pieces keep falling off it, and they're just insisting that no, it's still as sound as it ever was, you know. But you've got to reach a tipping point where they say, well, hold on, you know, maybe it's time to have another look.
David Tamihere's lawyer, Murray Gibson, says he'll be approaching the new Prime Minister to ask for a pardon. The owners of 17 Caltex stations have been reprimanded for underpaying hundreds of workers. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is calling for large franchises to take more responsibility for staff who work at the pumps. Jessie Chang reports.
More than 230 former and current Caltex employees were underpaid nearly $126,000 over 6 years. The directors of the 6 companies that own the stations, Sanjay and Deepak Bhagia, failed to ensure staff got the minimum wage and correct holiday pay. The Labour Inspectorate, which ordered the money to be properly paid, says it's a poor look for Caltex. Regional Manager Lua Ward says cases like this can cast a cloud over a franchise long after the workers have been paid back. Jessie Chang aho.
Fletcher Building's Board of Directors will take a 20% pay cut after the company took a $160 million hit in its building and interiors section. The company's shares dropped by 5.3% when the news was revealed this morning. Its chairman, Sir Ralph Norris, told shareholders at their annual general meeting today the board takes responsibility for the losses.
The issues with the company's performance have impacted our shareholders' investments. Accordingly, the board has resolved to reduce all directors' fees by 20% for the next 12 months with immediate effect.
Sir Ralph Norris also announced that a new Chief Executive, Ross Taylor, will start next month. The Southern District Health Board is making a bid to clear its backlog of urology patients by holding what it calls 2 mega clinics. The weekend-long clinics at Dunedin Hospital in November and December are expected to take more than 200 appointments a day. The board says clinicians will offer specialist assessments, diagnostic procedures and potentially surgery. 10 additional urologists and 10 specialist nurses are being brought in from around the country to help. The DHB's Chief Executive, Chris Fleming, says the immediate focus is providing care for patients who've been waiting too long. It's at 5 past 5. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says former British and Irish Lions coach Warren Gatland should give up coaching if he doesn't like it. Gatland has said he hated the recent tour, after which Lions players criticised his coaching methods. Hansen has told NZME Gatland should expect similar scrutiny if he's ever to coach the All Blacks, which he's been touted to do when Hansen steps down after the 2019 World Cup. Black Caps batsman Tom Latham says the team must forget about their first-up win in Mumbai if they're to become the first New Zealand side to win a one-day series in India. Latham was a standout performer in Game 1, scoring his 5th one-day century. A win in Pune tonight would give the tourists an unassailable lead in the three-match series, but Latham says they can't afford to get ahead of themselves.
It's important that we start again. The beauty of this side at the moment is we don't get too high when we win, and we don't get too low when we lose. So it's something that is in the back of the mind. It hasn't been done before by a New Zealand team.
Tom Latham. And the match gets underway at 9 o'clock. 2010 gold medalist Adam Hall headlines the New Zealand team heading to the 2018 Paralympic Winter Games in South Korea. It'll be his 4th Paralympic Games appearance. He'll be joined by 2014 silver medalist Corey Peters and para-snowboarder Carl Murphy, as well as Paralympics debutant Aaron Ewan. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Frances Arms. She's the new director of Rainbow Youth. Nick Tipping celebrates the music of George and Ira Gershwin, who wrote more jazz standards than Beethoven had hot dinners. And Motoko Kakubayashi is on the line from Japan, keeping an eye on those ballistic missiles flying across from North Korea, although the locals are possibly just as worried about cultural appropriation from the United States. On Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. For Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods, a few showers south of Whangarei tomorrow, clearing in the afternoon. Waikato, Waitomo, Taupo and Taumaranui, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Brief rain tomorrow morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a period of rain in Wairarapa tomorrow morning and a few showers further north. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape. Cloud increasing, rain developing tonight, clearing early tomorrow, but rain returning to Taranaki tomorrow night. Marlborough, Nelson, mainly fine weather, however scattered rain this evening and overnight. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls, easing from the south today. And fine tomorrow apart from isolated showers. And for Canterbury and Otago, scattered rain spreading north this afternoon, then clearing overnight. Fine tomorrow apart from isolated showers this afternoon. And for Southland, scattered showers, mainly about the coast. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers and a period of rain tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Anna Thomas. It's nice to be back. Thank you. Coming up, Eminem or Eminem. The National Party will have to find the checkbook for using a tune that sounded so like Lose Yourself. Also tonight, the Southern DHB and its 569 patient backup in the urology department, and a man whose cancer developed from being in his prostate to secondaries, including in his liver. We'll talk about waiting for 11 months for treatment, during which time his cancer went from quite bad to terminal. All of that and more coming up. But we begin tonight with the incoming Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who has unveiled the team that will help her run the country. A mix of ministers from Labour, New Zealand First and the Greens, of course. She announced the new lineup at Parliament this morning. We will talk to Grant Robertson live on the programme next. There weren't too many surprises, but Ms Ardern has signalled a new focus in several areas through portfolio allocations. Our political reporter Sarah Robson has more.
As expected, senior Labour MPs took the high-profile and big-spending portfolios. Grant Robertson will be Finance Minister, Chris Hipkins, Minister for Education, David Clark, Health Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, Minister for Social Development, and Phil Twyford, Minister of Housing and Urban Development. With housing a major priority, Jacinda Ardern has brought it back into one portfolio after the national government split it between 3 different ministers.
Mr Twyford will be working alongside the Minister for Building and Construction, Jenny Silise, an Auckland-based MP who, equally working across South Auckland, has an acute interest, understanding and empathy around the housing issue. She also holds an associate role, so together, both Jenny Silese and Phil Twyford will be delivering what is a very ambitious building program.
Ms Ardern will take on arts, culture and heritage and responsibility for child poverty reduction. She says she's accepted as Prime Minister she can't take on a large operational portfolio like Minister for Children.
I did not want to relinquish, however, the strong focus I want this government to maintain on child poverty. So I will ensure that focus remains by holding responsibility for child poverty reduction.
Meanwhile, the Ministry for Primary Industries in its current form is gone. Ms Ardern says instead there will be 3 separate ministers.
We'll be separating out the functions of fisheries. Our strong view that there are a range of indicators that there are issues and dysfunction in the ministry that needs to be worked through. We also want to separate out forestry. That was part of our campaign platform, an independent separate forestry service, and of course that leaves agriculture.
New Zealand First has 4 cabinet ministers. Winston Peters is Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Ron Mark has Defence and Tracy Martin is the Minister for Children. Shane Jones also takes on a hefty workload with forestry and infrastructure and the new Regional Economic Development portfolio, with oversight of a new $1 billion Regional Development Fund.
We're going to use it for neglected provincial infrastructure projects, not the least of which, some which will be rail. There's already been a host of requests on my cell phone from regional airports and a variety of other things.
The Greens have 3 ministers outside Cabinet and the leader, James Shaw, says his MPs are delighted with the portfolios they've been allocated.
In climate change, in relation to the 3,000 species that are facing extinction, they will now have a fighting chance, I think. In relation to people facing domestic and sexual violence, they will have someone to fight their corner in a way that I don't think that we've seen before.
Mr Shaw will be the Minister for Climate Change and Statistics Minister. Eugenie Sage holds the Conservation portfolio and Julianne Genter will be Minister for Women, as well as having the Associate Transport role. Jan Logie will be Under Secretary to the Justice Minister on domestic and sexual violence issues. The new ministers will be sworn in tomorrow at a ceremony at Government House in Wellington. Atu i te whare parimata mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Some big plans and ambitions amongst those new ministers. What will it all cost? Now, one of the key battlegrounds during the election campaign was National's $11.7 billion fiscal hole claim, widely discredited by all except Stephen Joyce and Bill English themselves. It pointed to the likelihood that finance will be the blowtorch portfolio, the area where National targets the most scrutiny, the most heat and demands the most light. Joining us now live is the incoming Finance Minister, Grant Robertson. Are you there, Mr Robertson?
I am, John. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's an exciting day.
Yeah, it is an exciting day. It is a blowtorch portfolio, isn't it? The Nats are going to be all over you like a rash, aren't they?
Oh, well, every opposition, takes great interest in what a government does and how it's paying for what it does, so I'd expect nothing less from that. Certainly hope that Mr Joyce might tidy up his accuracy of what he said during the election campaign if he's going to be holding that role. But
did you hear him on Morning Report this morning? Did you hear him on Morning Report?
I did.
Yeah,
I did hear him on Morning Report.
So the question is, so he wasn't saying $11.7 billion, although Susie held him to account about that, but he was saying you are going on holiday with 3 suitcases stuffed into one. And if we look at the 70 commitments that have risen, 70 plus commitments that have risen out of the coalition negotiations, and then we look at the money that you had unallocated in your fiscal plan after pre-fu, there isn't enough, is there?
Oh, no, I don't agree with that at all. In fact, Mr Joyce completely confused himself again on the radio this morning. The $1 billion Regional Development Fund will largely be funded out of unallocated capital expenditure. He was talking about the $4 billion worth of unallocated operational expenditure, the day-to-day expenditure. We have in our fiscal plan over a 4-year period $10 billion of unallocated capital spending. The vast majority, as Shane Jones just said in Sarah's track before, of that Regional Development Fund is about the neglected infrastructure in our regions, rail, airports, roads, some of the work we want to do around ports as well. So we have the money to do this. We have to be fiscally responsible. We know that. That's why we set those rules out. But I'm very confident we have the money to pay for what we're doing.
OK, you have the money to do it based on some fairly optimistic Treasury projections, right? So if you look at the revenue side and if you look at Winston Peters' sense of foreboding about what the economy might be about to do. The $10 million unallocated needs to guard against a downturn in revenue, all sorts of contingencies, all sorts of rainy day expenditure, plus the 70-plus coalition agreement policies. In other words, even if you're being kind at this stage, that money is stretched, isn't it?
Look, we've got an ambitious program, John, and I don't have any apology for that. There are a huge number of areas where we need to do much better than we've done in the past, in health and education and in housing and supporting our regions. I don't apologise for that program, and we're aware that we're going to have to work hard to be able to deliver it. But those are the forecasts we're dealing with, and we'll take into account the fact that Mr Peters has highlighted something that many economists recognise, that there may be some headwinds ahead for the New Zealand economy, but we're confident that on the basis of what Treasury's provided, that we can do this. We'll get into government. I'll get my first proper briefing from the Treasury tomorrow, and we'll take a look at those numbers then.
Is Mr Peters right about the headwinds? Are they winds you fear?
Oh, look, I think everyone looking around the global economy is aware that, there are certain risks there, but I'm confident about New Zealand. I think that the New Zealand economy, particularly when we start to invest, in our regions, where we lift our work on research and development, that we put more resources into education and training, I'm really confident about New Zealand and New Zealanders' ability to be productive and to, give us prosperity. We will have to work alongside them to do that, but we've got the ability.
What's the best way you can invest in the regions? Let's take the Central North Island, for example, Taumaranui, which has been a bit down on its luck in the last few years. How do you spend money effectively, meaningfully, successfully in communities which are struggling?
Look, each community is different, so it's very hard to generalise in that regard. But let's take an example like rail. We've seen New Zealand's rail network be underinvested in. We've seen the fact that we aren't moving freight and goods on rail as anywhere near as much as we could. We aren't moving people in it, if you look at the Golden Triangle either. If we start to get that right, we have a fully functioning rail network. We move to electrification. We actually start making sure that people have confidence that it's the best way to move their goods around, that they can move them quickly. That'll make a big difference. We also know that we've got to make sure that in those places that there is good broadband. We still don't have a proper rollout of rural broadband across New Zealand. There are an enormous range of ways that we can be more supportive in our regions, and that then gives people confidence to invest there, start to create job opportunities there. And I guess that's the other point I'd like to make, John, is now we tend to think of these things purely in terms of cost. There is a huge return to New Zealand if regional New Zealand's humming. It's creating jobs, and those people are paying taxes, and that money flows through the economy and they're spending as well. Too often we've seen this just as a cost, when actually it's an investment in our future.
Very quick answer, if possible. What is the thing you hope to achieve that will be most meaningful for a first term of a Labour government?
I want to see unemployment come down to 4% and below, and for the jobs that we create to be ones that are meaningful and well paid.
Grant Robertson, incoming Finance Minister, who will be up at Government House tomorrow to be sworn in. Thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. The Southern DHB has this afternoon confirmed to Checkpoint that there are currently 569 urology patients waiting longer than they should for treatment. Now, as you'll know, Checkpoint has investigated this at length. In August and September, we revealed the full impact of delays to treatment in the urology department, some of them in the most serious cases, and I quote, life-shortening. One of the men in that category was Stephen Hoffman. In September of last year, he presented with such classic symptoms of prostate cancer that his GP made an urgent referral to Dunedin Hospital. He wasn't even seen by a specialist for 5 months. Having initially been told he'd have surgery within weeks of his referral, he waited 11 months before it happened. He's now terminally ill with secondary cancer, and he's still waiting, this time for paperwork. I went to see him this morning.
I feel quite good now, but I'm going to go home in about 10 days. I'll be back home in 12 days we start the chemo treatment, so things will change then, I'm told, so we'll just see what happens.
Where's your cancer now?
In the liver. Moved to the liver now. It's prostate cancer, travelled to the liver, called secondary cancer.
So it started in your prostate, you had, and we've talked about it before in Checkpoint, you had this ridiculous delay in your treatment. And in fact, we've had the Chief Medical Officer from the Southern DHB admit on Checkpoint that the delay was far too long.
Yep.
And now the cancer's in your liver.
Yep, yep. So it was a difference of basically 8 months that made the difference of it, you know, like it was an enlarged prostate and it just turned into a really great tumour, big enough to let cancer get out of it. But if it had been done earlier, none of that would have been the case. So yeah.
And now it's in your liver.
Yep. Now it's travelled to the liver. It is what it is, and we just got to, like I said, we don't want it to happen to anyone else. But I'm down the track now, yes, and there is a claim into ACC, and we want that ticked. We are having trouble living on pittance, yeah.
Because you were the primary breadwinner in your home, right?
Yeah.
And you haven't worked since this happened?
No, no.
So the economic impact of this. So not only have you got secondary cancer, which is in your liver, as a result of this delay in treatment, you also have had a substantial hit to your household income.
Oh, we've used up all our savings and holiday pays, and everything's gone. So you basically are in a situation to run your house. You can't even put petrol in the car to go for a drive. So, you know, you just got enough to pay the bills for the house and get a bit of food and get by. That's pretty daunting. Pretty daunting cast if you're on a limited time that you want to enjoy a few things before you go. Yeah.
So you want to put in a claim to ACC because of what we can shorthand as a kind of medical misadventure, because there wasn't the adequate response to the diagnosis, and because you developed secondary cancer during the time you waited for treatment. There is a compelling claim to be made to ACC here, right?
Yep.
But you need documents from the Southern DHB.
They're just waiting on 2 reports now, one from the general administration side and one from one of the specialists, and then he will do it. The ACC clinical advisor is waiting for them to come, and he wants to fast track the claim to get it through, but he needs those reports to get it.
From the Southern DHB?
Yep.
The same people who made you wait for your treatment and developed secondary cancer while you waited are now making you wait for your forms to make an ACC claim?
Yep. 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 I can understand on one side of it the specialist, so the guy that did the operation on me. I know he's got about hundreds of cases backlogged trying to get through them, so he's under pressure to find a bit of time to do a report. But the other side of it, the administration side, I don't see why that report isn't done and put in. So yeah.
Has anyone apologised to you?
No. Like I said, I'm not worried about apologies. I don't believe. You try and make someone apologise to you, it's not genuine. What's the point? I just want something done. Just get the thing going. Give me what I should be getting so I can go for a drive and go and catch a fish or something while I'm sitting around waiting in the middle of this chemotherapy.
Steve Hoffman. I was talking to him earlier today. The Southern DHB CEO is Chris Fleming. Our producer Bridget Burke spoke to him a short time ago and asked him about the backlog of 569 urology patients and why it had taken so long for the relevant paperwork to be filed to enable Mr Hoffman to claim for ACC support.
Look, I followed up on the concerns raised, and I have
spoken to the clinicians involved. One of the clinicians apologises. He received a request at the same time for information from the Health and Disability Commissioner, and unfortunately confused the request as the same thing, so responded to one and not the other. That clinician has now written the response to ACC, and it will be sent this week. The second outstanding item is a response from management on a series of questions ACC have asked. The manager is away today, but I will personally follow up and make sure it's completed by the end of the week. In terms of Mr. Hoffman, in terms of directly, we have commented a number of times in terms of our sincere regrets about the delays that have been caused, both to Mr. Hoffman and the other patients who were waiting unacceptably long. As for why this response to ACC has taken a long time, I can't answer that at the moment because I've only found out about the issue today. We have been focusing on improving the service for all patients as quickly as we can.
So, can we turn to improvement on services? Could you please confirm for me the number of patients that we would refer to, I guess, as a backlog? So let's just talk specifically about the total number of patients for urology who are waiting outside ministry guidelines.
Outside Ministry of Health guidelines is 569.
Can you even cope with that?
Indeed we can. The work that we have been doing, both the urologists and the team here, and also being supported by Stephen Marks, we've got plans well developed. And in fact, today we announced that we're going to have some intensive clinics over November, and the intention is to target and clear all that backlog so that the service improvements that are also being planned by the team can be implemented in a sustainable way. Very difficult to bring about service change when our health professionals are consistently under the pressure of the backlogged volume. So that's why we want to clear the backlog to make it sustainable.
With regard to the current backlog, how many other possible Mr. Hoffmans are out there?
Well, as we've said, there's 569 patients outstanding, and we have openly acknowledged that there will be some harm caused by some of those patients, for some of those patients, the least harm being the delay in treatment.
The truth is you don't know, do you? You don't know the ramifications of these wait times on people's health and well-being.
I wouldn't want to speculate on it, no, absolutely. But what I am acknowledging is that the delay in itself creates the risk of further harm.
It's the Southern DHB CEO, Chris Fleming, talking to our producer, Bridget Burke. 5:27. We turn now to M&M. Note my use of the evals, the National Party and the High Court in Wellington. As hip-hop trios go, not exactly Run DMC, but they have all found themselves at the centre of a copyright case so unusual it has gained pretty big international attention. In short, did the National Party breach copyright with their use of a piece of production music in their 2014 election campaign ad that sounded strikingly similar to the M&M song, Lose Yourself? Yes, says the High Court. The penalty, $600,000, which, believe it or not, is arguably cheap, given the song won an Academy Award, a Grammy Award, went to #1 in the US, stayed top 10 for months and has sold roughly 12 million copies. But National argued they bought the production music in good faith, believing they were entitled to use it. Yes, and more importantly, no, said the High Court. Joel Martin is Eminem's publisher. A short time ago, I asked him what he made of the High Court's decision.
We're still reading it. You know, it's over 132 pages. We got it about an hour ago, and it's quite a detailed decision and an opinion by the judge. And frankly, we weren't expecting that much detail. I don't know what we were expecting, but she was quite thorough in her opinion. And some things that we're reading that came out were quite interesting for us because they confirmed, in fact, that the song "Lose Yourself" is, of course, original, and the defense all along was that, well, it really wasn't that original of a composition because there are so many songs that use the same three chords, that you can't be serious. You know, you can't say that the song is worth X amount of dollars because everybody else uses the same three chords. And we found that preposterous to begin with. But what was amazing as we're reading this now is she takes note of the fact that in the trial it was disclosed that they actually used Lose Yourself in the first place to cut the commercial to, and we did not know that. And the idea that they claimed that there was no intention to be able to copy Lose Yourself is just absurd, because they did use Lose Yourself, and then they removed it, and then they sought a sound-alike because they knew that we would not be licensing this song to them for a political purpose. And that's kind of validated our whole position here. So she really got it right for us. You know, aside from the damages and the award, which we're happy about, that was our main goal, to be able to show that we're not going to roll over for anybody at this point with respect to a claim that this is not an original work.
Right, so the suggestion that the Nats were caught out by this, that they purchased music from a production company, not really knowing, because this isn't a big M&M constituency we're talking about here, not really knowing what they were dealing with. You say that is absolutely undermined by the fact that the first version of the commercial was indeed cut to Lose Yourself.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what we didn't see in the United States. We have a system where we can find these things out in discovery, but your system there is a little bit different. We don't take depositions. There's interrogatories that you have, but until we got to trial, we never understood that. And somehow this came out in trial, and we were flabbergasted that this could come out, and the admission that they, in fact, used Lose Yourself to begin with, and then claim that, well, you know, it was pretty legal. We just kind of used a song that had those same three chords was bizarre. And the fact that we had to spend 3 years getting to that point, fighting the National Party that hid behind others. And listen, if it wasn't for the National Party, nobody would have used anything that had Lose Yourself in it as a composition, because that's what they wanted. They wanted that all along. They just knew or assumed that they couldn't license it, so they did something pretty illegal by creating others or orchestrating others to kind of create something for them that they knew they shouldn't be doing.
Very quick, yes or no answer, Joel. Had they come to you and said, hey, we'd really like to license this song, would you have let them?
No.
Joel Martin, who is the publisher, representative of the publishers of the song Lose Yourself. Interestingly, Chrysler did use Lose Yourself in a Super Bowl commercial. I think just one or two plays. They paid $3 million for the rights. So M&M doesn't come cheap. We're going to talk about copyright and the law involved with an expert later in the program who also sings the song. It's delightful. All of that and more coming up. Also coming up on Checkpoint, convicted double murderer David Tamihere is to ask the new Prime Minister for a pardon. Fletcher Building shareholders and workers protest people before profit outside the company's annual shareholder meeting. We're going to look at that in depth tonight. Nona is here with business news and much more to come before 6. But first, Anna Thomas with the headlines.
Thanks, John. The National Party is suing the company that provided music for a 2014 election campaign ad. The party has been ordered to pay $600,000 in damages to M&M's publisher for breaching copyright by using the rapper's music in the ad. The party says it had sought assurances from industry professionals that the track Lose Yourself could be legally used and is preparing legal action of its own. Child poverty, housing and economic development are a strong focus for new ministers in the Labour-led government. Housing has been brought back into one portfolio under Phil Twyford after the last government split it between 3 ministers. Jacinda Ardern will be the minister responsible for child poverty reduction, while New Zealand First's Shane Jones takes regional economic development. The lawyer for convicted double murderer David Tamihere says he will be approaching Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern to ask for a pardon. This follows the sentencing today of one of the 3 jailhouse snitches who gave evidence against Tamihere at his 1990 trial. He'll serve 8 years and 7 months for lying to the jury. Murray Gibson says this is another brick in the wall of evidence against his client that is slowly being dismantled. The owners of 17 Caltex stations have been reprimanded for underpaying hundreds of workers by a total of almost $126,000. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is calling for large franchises to take more responsibility for workers at the bottom of the chain. It says cases like this can cast a cloud over a franchise long after the workers have been paid back. And the Southern District Health Board is making a bid to clear its backlog of urology patients by holding what it calls 2 mega clinics at Dunedin Hospital in November and December. Clinicians will offer specialist assessments, diagnostic procedures and potentially surgery. 10 additional urologists and 10 specialist nurses are being brought in from around the country to help. And that's the news.
Thanks, Anna. 25.5 to 4.5 to 6. Approaching 6 in the not too distant future. And angry shareholders called the troubled Fletcher building a disaster company after it slashed its profit forecast because of the $160 million hit it took in the building and interiors section. The company's shares dropped 5.3% when the news was revealed. It had already clocked up losses of $292 million in its building and interiors business the previous year. In a moment, we'll hear from our business reporter, Nona Peltier, who's beside me here in the Auckland studio. But first, Nita Blake-Person, who was also at the company's AGM today.
More than 200 shareholders turned up to the meeting at Auckland Museum, with angry protesters waiting to meet them outside. The 40 or so picketers included a group protesting Fletcher's development of a housing area near Auckland Airport, as well as employees who want better pay and working conditions.
The workers of Aotearoa, New Zealand, are tired of not having enough money to pay their bills.
It was standing room only inside, with one shareholder saying he was glad he only had a few shares in Fletcher Building, describing it as a disaster company. The high-profile founder of the Shareholders Association, Bruce Shepherd, donned a priest's outfit for the meeting, saying the occasion felt like a church service, and he offered his services to shareholders and the board.
Who wants absolution? Who wants exorcism? Who doesn't give a shit? Now, I must tell you, if you don't give a shit is what you'll get.
The chairman, Sir Ralph Norris, responded by saying the board was focused and that the sins and omissions of the past would not happen again. He's also revealed the board of directors are taking a 20% pay cut immediately.
The issues with the company's performance have impacted our shareholders' investments. Accordingly, the board has resolved to reduce all directors' fees by 20% for the next 12 months with immediate effect.
That news has been welcomed by some shareholders who say the board is making the right moves to get the company back on track.
I've had shares for a long time and I'm hoping that they were going to continue the same way. Well, not the same way, the better way.
I felt the board did a very good job in saying the buck stopped there and taking a voluntary 20% cut, so I'm very happy with how the board have managed it.
But others are less complimentary, including this stakeholder who says he has no faith in the board.
Not in the board, I don't know. None of them, I wouldn't. No, I'd like to see them all gone.
Matthew Oates, a Fletcher's shareholder and truck driver for one of Fletcher's Waikato businesses, is also unimpressed.
No, not at all. We're on $18 an hour, and I'll swap what they've got now after their pay cut for what I've got. Yeah, happy with that.
The issues raised by the protesters at the gate made their way into the meeting, with a group opposed to one of Fletcher's developments at Ihumatao near Auckland Airport, raising several issues about the project, which they say is happening on sacred land. Sir Ralph rejects the claims, repeating that the project has been set down for land that was privately owned for the last 150 years, eventually shutting the protesters down.
Are our profits worth more than people? I say to you, no, as a shareholder.
Look, I think we've given enough of this. I declare the meeting closed.
And I ask and put a motion from the floor that Fletcher's building...
A new Fletcher Building Chief Executive has also been announced. Ross Taylor is due to start the role on November 22nd. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Nita Blake-Person aho.
So that report from Nita, our business reporter Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona was at the meeting today. What did you take away from it all? Gosh, Ralph Norris was sounding.
You know, it was really, I think what people took away from it was he talked and talked and talked for more than 40 minutes. And I think he sort of talked people into submission, to be honest. You know, because really, I mean, he did a good job of managing that crisis. He explained everything in great detail. You know, but at the end of the meeting, he was faced with a barrage of questions of all kinds and so forth. And, you know, he was challenged quite a lot. I mean, the shareholders weren't very happy, but they did, re-elect a couple of they elected one board member and they re-elected another. And, you know, Ralph, when I was at the meeting, I had a chance to speak with Sir Ralph Norris afterwards, and I asked him if he should have maybe perhaps put himself forward for re-election, given that dismal performance of the company. And we have a little bit of Ralph Norris's response to that.
It would be very easy for me to pass this on to somebody else and have them get up to speed. I think that, as I said, I've learned a lot. My fellow directors have learned a lot. And the best learnings are the ones that come from, unfortunately, from things that go wrong, rather than necessarily the things that go right. As far as accountability is concerned, if there is a view of shareholders in the main that I should go, well, I would go, but that's not what I've heard. And it was interesting to note today, for example, I mean, Shareholders Association advertised against Cecilia Tarrant's reappointment. They spoke at the meeting against her reappointment, and 99.1% of shareholders decided to reappoint her. So I don't know whether the Shareholders Association really speaks for the majority. It obviously doesn't speak for the majority of shareholders.
The chair of Fletcher Buildings, Ralph Norris, who was on message. On message.
The whole way, yes.
Yeah. What did the company share price do today?
Well, actually, it did recover after the market opened. It was down quite a lot, but it ended down, more than 3.5% by 29 cents to $7.67. That was helped by the announcement of the chief executive, who's well known in Australia. When the Australian market opened, the price bumped up there, and it took the New Zealand price with it. Anyway, that did have an impact on the NZX Top 50 Index, in case you were wondering.
I was just going to ask, Nona.
That's right. Well, it broke its record-breaking streak, but only by 7 points. The market fell just those 7 points to 8,123, and that's really all because of Fletcher. The New Zealand dollar was steady at 68.9 US cents, 89.3 Australian, and 52.4 pence.
Nona Peltier, our business reporter here in Auckland. Thank you so much, Nona. Convicted double murderer David Tamihere is to ask the new Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern for a pardon. Now, today, one of the 3 jailhouse snitches who gave evidence against Tamihere at his 1990 trial was sentenced to 8 years and 7 months for lying to the jury. Tamihere's lawyer, Murray Gibson, says he will approach the Prime Minister, the incoming Prime Minister, and ask her to follow the same process Rob Muldoon did in the Arthur Allen Thomas case. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Murray Gibson described today's sentencing of witness C as another brick in the wall of evidence against his client that is slowly being dismantled. Witness C told Tamihere's trial that Tamihere had made a number of confessions to him, including that he had sexually abused the Swedish tourists Heidi Parkinen and Sven Hoglund, and that he had dumped their bodies at sea. After Tamihere's trial, Mr Hogland's body was found buried in a shallow grave. Outside court today, David Tamihere, who was released on parole in 2010, said today's sentence was meaningless, but getting witness C convicted for lying at his trial was the main thing.
Since I've been convicted, the Crown's case just keeps falling apart. well, bits and pieces keep falling off it, and they're just insisting that no, it's still as sound as it ever was, but you've got to reach a tipping point where they say, well, hold on, maybe it's time to have another look.
Tamahere says he doesn't dwell on what Witness C did to him.
It's been a long time now. If you keep stewing it over it, and sanity lies on that side of the door, so I just thought, well, we'll just keep plugging away at it. But, being bitter and twisted, it only damages yourself rather than the bloke you're bitter and twisted about probably doesn't even know.
He says he won't stop trying to get his convictions overturned until he's buried, and even then he hopes someone else will take up the fight. The prosecution of Witness C was brought by career criminal and self-styled jailhouse lawyer Arthur Taylor. Richard Francois appeared on behalf of Taylor, beginning with an opening statement stressing the importance of truth and justice.
If we think no individual can change the lives of others, it was a Polynesian who sailed across the Pacific Ocean and discovered a new world. A woman established the first...
Mr Francois asked Justice Fata to impose the highest possible sentence for the offending, 14 years in prison, saying Witness C's was the worst perjury case the country had seen. He said Witness C's evidence was important because it dovetailed into the evidence of the trampers who told the court they saw Tamahere with a woman who looked like Heidi Parkinen at a campsite.
That's where Witness C's evidence is very important, because he says that Mr David Tamahere confessed. I almost got sprung by these two people. Now that, of course, has been found to be, by a verdict of his peers, as lies, perjury.
He said Witness C had also lied to a Human Rights Tribunal hearing and at his own trial, where he initially placed all the blame on his co-accused. Witness C's lawyer Adam Simpringham said his client poses no future risk of perjuring himself because no prosecutor would ever call him as a witness again. He conceded that Witness C's evidence was important, but said the Court of Appeal also found that it would be surprising if the jury gave Witness C's story much credence. Mr Simpringham said his client would be appealing. Justice Fata continued the interim name suppression order until the appeal has been heard. In sentencing, the judge said Witness C must have known his evidence would carry consequences for Tamahere.
Your perjury is a brazen assault on the foundation of our criminal justice system. It also appears to be the worst example of perjury within this jurisdiction.
Justice Fata said it was not the worst possible offending of its kind. For example, Witness C didn't claim to be an eyewitness. He took into account Witness C's poor health. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gayahau.
The new government's education lineup has inspired optimism among teachers and principals and caution among privately owned early childhood and tertiary institutions. Now, Labour's Chris Hipkins will replace National's Nikki Kaye as the new Minister of Education. Of course, the Associate Education Minister is Kelvin Davis, who has responsibility for Māori education, Jenny Salesa, and New Zealand First's Tracy Martin. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, filed this report.
Chris Hipkins has been Labour's education spokesperson long enough to have established relationships with all the main education groups. So too has Tracy Martin, and the pair have already worked together on Parliament's Education and Science Select Committee. Fetu Cormack from the Principals Federation says principals will be very happy with the ministerial lineup.
Principals across the country will be uplifted by this news, that we've got a group of people who are focused on education in a positive way, and there's a focus on getting the best out of our young people, working with the profession and providing sufficient funding for schools to be able to do what they need to do.
Teacher unions echoed that sentiment, saying they're looking forward to working with the new minister. But there's some nervousness about how the Labour-led administration will treat privately owned tertiary institutions and early childhood centres. Christine Clark from Independent Tertiary Education New Zealand says she's confident it can work with both Chris Hipkins and Tracy Martin. But she doesn't want the Green Party to influence tertiary policy.
Labour has told us, and I believe Chris, that he sees a place for private, or we prefer independent. Greens have told us that they actually see very limited value in what we offer, and I would be very, very concerned if they would become dominant in that area.
Likewise, Peter Reynolds from the Early Childhood Council says there's some nervousness about the new government's attitude to privately owned institutions in his sector.
I think there's some caution there. There's some optimism and there's some concern being expressed depending upon who you talk to. Until we see what the real shape of the policies are and what's been traded off, particularly between the coalition partners, it'll be difficult to judge.
Chris Hipkins' appointment sees the return of tertiary education to the Education Minister. Chris Whelan from Universities New Zealand says having a separate tertiary minister was good for focusing on specific issues.
Over the last few years, it's become pretty obvious that that's been at the expense of kind of policy coherence, particularly in the kind of the joins between compulsory and post-compulsory and transitions actually into the workforce. I think having one minister with oversight of that is probably going to be good at getting some of that kind of policy coherence back.
Chris Whelan says universities are cautiously optimistic about the new government. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Let's go back to another of the new government's announcements. Retired people say they'll be taking up the government's free annual doctor's visit, but some say it won't make much of a difference in the long run. The visits are part of a new super gold card for people 65 years and over that New Zealand First and Labour have announced as part of their coalition agreement. Laura Tupou asked some Auckland over 65s what they think.
About 700,000 New Zealanders have a gold card, which offers perks like free off-peak travel on public transport. But with a new government comes a new card, the Super Gold Card, which Winston Peters says will give users access to deals in banking, along with other entitlements and concessions. But the only one that's been detailed so far is a free health check and a free eye check each year. So what do cardholders think about it? At a bus stop, Joseph says he's a bit sceptical about it all.
He says it's free if the taxpayer pays for it, eh? Nothing's free. Well, somebody pays for it.
How often would you go to the doctors each year?
Well, I try not to, because I don't like paying. I don't like paying with the cash. I like to keep as much money in my pocket as I can.
If you get one free visit a year, will you take that up though?
Oh, of course I'll take advantage. Well, whether I take advantage of it, I suppose I would.
71-year-old Bainey Canditch says the pension doesn't leave her with much money after the bills are paid. She says she goes to the doctors twice a month and pays $12 each time.
I would like it to be better because I pay for my tablets and things like that. Sometimes they give me a lot of tablets, but I won't take it because it's far too expensive, $5 an item. And I said, no, I don't want that. I'm not going to take it.
Helen says she goes to the doctors when she's sick and for a checkup every 3 months. She's welcoming the move from Mr. Peters.
Good for me if I pay $40. And $40 to go to the doctor. I'm at the age where I need it. I'm going to be 90 next year, and I think he's marvellous.
The question was a timely one for Irene.
We're just on our way now.
And how much does it cost you to go to the doctors?
$40.
So it would be quite great to have
one of them free. Sure.
Alan Corbett says he doesn't normally see the doctor, but if he does, it's $10, so his savings aren't significant.
I suppose it's all right. I mean, well, one a year is better than none a year. I'll go to the races, yeah.
Pat Palmer says she also goes every 3 months, so saving on a trip will be a real help.
Great, because mine is $40 every time I go to the doctor, and that is too much. Good on them. I'm all for Winston.
Did you vote for him?
Yes, I did, and Jacinda as well.
Well, you got a win-win.
Win-win-win. Absolutely marvellous.
And Mr. Peters hasn't lost any fans, even if they differ on whether the yearly visit is enough.
I voted for Winnie and Labour, of course.
So you're happy with the outcome?
Oh, indeed, I am. Winnie's the man.
Mr. Peters says the upgrade to the Super Gold Card will cost between $6 and $8 million. Labour says it will cost $16 million. But what's for sure is the coalition government is committed to keeping superannuation entitlement at 65 years. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Laura Tupou aho.
7 minutes to 6 here with Checkpoint on RNZ. A proposal to put housing on a Christchurch park, which is currently used as a golf course, has been called a land grab in the name of earthquake recovery. Now, the proposal is part of a government plan for the earthquake damaged red zone. However, the park is not within the red zone. Rachel Graham went out to the Rafiti golf course in the Christchurch suburb of New Brighton to speak to some locals.
Rafiti Golf Course has been around since the 1930s and is part of Rafiti Domain over the road from the beach in eastern Christchurch. Regenerate Christchurch, a government agency tasked with developing a plan for the red zone land, has recently put out 10 proposals for public consultation. The proposals suggest a mix of future land uses, including cycleways, flood mitigation, recreation areas and housing. 5 of the 10 proposals include what is described as a land swap. Avondale Golf Course and Rafiti would be turned into housing with a total of around 900 homes. A new golf course would then be created on earthquake-damaged land. Kathy Baker is part of a group called Guardians of Rafiti, which was established 3 years ago when the council looked at closing the golf course. She says people are outraged that once again the well-used green space is under threat.
People are angry. Could I say the peasants are rising? They're very angry because this is the heart of our community. And interestingly, Guardians had a meeting with Park Rangers a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying there's so much pressure in the domain for sporting fields, and even if they wanted to move the golf course, let's use the golf course space for sporting fields.
Along with Kathy Baker, Robbie Bagent is part of a group of around 20 locals who have sent an open letter to Regenerate Christchurch asking them to hold public meetings to allow people to be better informed and to extend the consultation period. Mr Bagent and Mrs Baker say at the moment the proposal feels like a land grab and people don't feel they have enough time or information to have their say. Robbie Bagent says the 10 proposals include many positive suggestions for the red zone, but including Rafiti Domain is undermining Regenerate's own consultation process.
When 5 of their 10 options show a land swap with Rafiti, it shifts people's focus to that, so it comes away from the red zone and it's not beneficial to them to get some decent feedback. You know, I mean, we've had enough asset stripping going on over here as it is, and the golf course is a massive asset to this community.
Mr Bagent says if Regenerate want to increase housing in the area, they should look to the red zone land.
When the area was red zoned, it was never said it couldn't be put back into housing. It was always on a mandate that it was cheaper to remediate land on a large scale, and then it could go back to housing rather than doing it on an individual property basis. That mandate still stands. There's no reason that that can't be done. It just feels like they're taking an easy out.
No one from Regenerate Christchurch was available for an interview, but it released a statement from Chief Executive Ivan Iafeta. Mr Iafeta says the public and council feedback had encouraged them to look at the land outside of the red zone as part of the regeneration plan. He says 5,442 houses are no longer in East Christchurch, and this has affected the area in many ways, including the local economy and the membership of various clubs and societies. Mr Iafeta says residential development is one way of increasing the local population and economy. A report from Regenerate Christchurch also states that the strongest financial benefits come from the land swap option. In response to the request for more community engagement, Regenerate staff have attended a New Brighton weekend market and will continue to for the next 2 weeks. Mr Iafeta says they already have around 600 submissions and aren't planning to extend the closing date, which ends on Monday 6th of November. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, this is Rachel Graham.
2.5 minutes to 6. Anna has just arrived with the 6 o'clock news. But before then, a lot of feedback tonight, and we really appreciate it. You can text us 2101. You can, of course, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And we are on Twitter and Facebook. Lots and lots of people, by the way, getting our material after the fact through Facebook. There is a big repository now of Checkpoint stories and interviews available on Facebook. Thank you, all of you who are going there to get stuff or who are watching us live on Facebook. Let's have a look at some of the feedback. This is from Barry Allen about M&M and the interview we did with Joel Martin from the Music Publishers. I'm not sure the music producer you've had on really represented the judgment accurately. It seems the advertisement was played to the National Party campaign team, and it took a staffer to recognise the similarity with Lose Yourself shortly after the campaign was pulled. There was no deliberate illegality that's reflected in the limitation of damages to the equivalent of the licence fee. The National Party relied on music producers to make the music. These producers made use of the M&M track and are now being sued by the National Party to indemnify them for the damages they've been ordered to pay. Barry Allen, who was Associate Professor of Law. Actually, the National Party bought a thing called M&M-esque from a production company. So it was, it seems on the face of it, a willful and deliberate rip-off, but by a production company that the National Party thought had the appropriate permissions. That's what they said. We'll have more on that later with a lawyer who specialises in copyright joining us out of the US. In fact, some of his material was used in the case at the High Court. This about some of the subjects we've covered tonight. An $11.5 billion hole, over 500 urology patients with their health under threat, a $600k fine re M&M, which commentators say was obviously M&M. Stephen Joyce should resign. Campaign manager, ex-radio worker who knows about radio publishing, and Minister of Finance responsible for Dunedin Health funding. A record of poor judgment, says John. Hi, John. Past Minister Stephen Joyce maintains his party's arrogance. The National Party clearly breached copyright. Pay up and accept you were wrong. And someone else on our interview was Steve Hoffman, who had prostate cancer, was referred for urgent treatment to the hospital, wasn't seen by a specialist for 5 months, didn't get surgery for 11 months, and is now terminally ill with secondary cancer in his liver. One of you says medical misadventure. This is corporate manslaughter. Thank you all for your feedback. We appreciate it. More on the big announcement of today after the news, but let's just savour the pips before 6.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The National Party is suing the company that provided music for a 2014 election campaign ad. The High Court has found the party breached copyright by using music copied from Eminem's song Lose Yourself and has ordered it to pay damages of $600,000. National says it bought the music, called Eminem-esque, from a company in Australia that in turn had bought it from the US. In her judgment, Justice Campbell says not only does the music sound like Lose Yourself, it was intended to. A representative of Eminem in Detroit, Joel Martin, told Checkpoint there's no doubt copyright was infringed.
This is exactly the same. It's obviously aimed at the same thing. It's called after the same thing. And then they have the gall to come in and say, oh, no, this isn't copyright infringement. And you can see why Eminem and 8 Mile Productions were outraged.
Joel Martin says Justice Campbell's judgment that Eminem-esque was too close to Lose Yourself is very well argued and thorough. The incoming Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says he's confident there's enough money to carry out the new government's ambitious program. Earlier today, National's finance spokesman Stephen Joyce restated his election campaign claims about Labor not having enough money to carry out its planned policies. But Mr Robertson told Checkpoint Mr Joyce is confused about where the money's coming from.
He was talking about the $4 billion worth of unallocated operational expenditure, the day-to-day expenditure. We have in our fiscal plan over a 4-year period $10 billion of unallocated capital spending.
The incoming Finance Minister, Grant Robertson. The Prime Minister-elect says New Zealand's offer to take refugees from Australia's offshore detention centres remains on the table. The offer was first made in 2013 and was most recently rejected by the Australian government in February. Jacinda Ardern says her government is committed to taking 150 refugees from offshore detentions, but she needs to study the offer.
I want to look at the detail of the offer that was made and the obligations that we've set out that we would take on. Of course, that would be within our quota, and also look at that within existing intent that we've shared with the UN around taking UN-mandated refugees. So I want to check what it was exactly the government committed to.
Jacinda Ardern. Australia rejected New Zealand's offer because detainees who earned New Zealand citizenship would have the right to go to Australia. The lawyer for the convicted double murderer David Tamihere says he will be approaching the new Prime Minister to ask for a pardon. Today, one of the 3 jailhouse snitches who gave evidence against Tamihere at his 1990 trial was sentenced to 8 years and 7 months for lying to the jury. Edward Gay reports.
Murray Gibson says he'll be asking Miss Ardern to do what Rob Muldoon did for Arthur Allen Thomas. In 1978, Mr Muldoon ordered a QC to conduct a report into the Thomas case and eventually pardoned him. Mr Gibson described today's sentencing of witness C as another brick in the wall of evidence against his client that's slowly being dismantled. Witness C told Tamahere's trial that Tamahere had made a number of confessions to him, including how he'd sexually assaulted the Swedish tourists, Heidi Parkinen and Sven Hoagland, and dumped their bodies at sea. He later recanted his evidence. I Tamaki Makoto ko Edward Gaiaho.
A Southland leader says the region is short of hundreds of houses for its growing population. A report released today says the region does not have enough decent housing stock to meet demand, nor does it have enough state and emergency housing. The Community Housing Strategy makes 29 recommendations, including creating a regional healthy home standard for rental properties and a code of practice for rental property managers. Invercargill's Deputy Mayor Rebecca Amundsen says more homes need to be built.
Like everywhere else, we've got a growing population. It might be a bit of a slow growth at the moment, but it is growing. One of the people in the housing group reckons that we need to be building one new house a day for a year in order to sort of keep up with the demand that we have, and that's probably not happening.
Rebecca Amundsen says the council plans to partner with community organisations to improve the region's housing. A motorcyclist has died in a crash with a bus in the Auckland suburb of Burswood. The police say they're attending the crash, which happened in Te Rākau Drive about an hour and a half ago. The road has been closed between Greenmount Drive and Huntington Drive, and drivers are being asked to avoid the area. It's 6:05. The Black Caps batsman Tom Latham says he's relishing playing down the batting order as his side aims to close out its first one-day series win over India in India. Latham's fifth ODI century helped guide New Zealand to a 6-wicket win in Mumbai earlier this week. The left-hander usually opens the batting but is playing down the order for the 3-match series. He says that batting at 5 comes naturally to him.
I've played in that position before when I first started playing for New Zealand, so it's not a position that's unfamiliar to me. So for me, it was more of a tactical shift than anything. Coming in the middle when the ball's a little bit softer and playing a bit more spin. So it was nice that I adapted quickly.
Tom Latham. And tonight's match in Pune starts at 9 o'clock. The All Blacks winger Julian Savea will get the chance to make a point to the selectors when the selectors that he has fallen out of favour with when he plays against the world's top team. Not wanted for the recent Rugby Championship or the Northern Hemisphere Tour, Savea will turn out for the Barbarians against his former teammates at Twickenham early next month. And the former world tennis #1 Novak Djokovic and 3-time Grand Slam winner Stan Wawrinka will return from long layoffs at an exhibition event in Abu Dhabi in December. Djokovic hasn't played since his semi-final loss at Wimbledon because of an elbow injury. Wawrinka also has been off the scene since Wimbledon, having undergone knee surgery. And that's the news.
A focus on partnership to raise the minimum wage.
I'm interested in how we can ease the burden on small businesses in particular, because we are asking them to join with us in making sure workers are earning a decent wage.
To find a new answer for the East-West link.
It's a seriously congested problem, and to just abandon it would not be the right way to go. So we're happy to work with the new government and find a solution.
To improve the environment.
We're all in this together, all aspects of society. We've all got our role to play when it comes to water.
A perfect partnership. You and Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the award-winning professor developing radical new sustainable manufacturing materials. And after 10, a fairy tale come true for first-time Australian author Jessica Townsend. Her book Nevermore is being published in 23 countries and had Hollywood studios fighting over it. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Thursday, Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods. A few showers south of Whangarei tomorrow, clearing in the afternoon. Waikato, Waitomo, Taupo and Taumaranui. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Brief rain tomorrow morning. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa. Period of rain in Wairarapa tomorrow morning and a few showers further north. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape. Cloud increasing, rain developing tonight, but it will clear early tomorrow. However, it's going to return to Taranaki tomorrow night. Marlborough and Nelson mainly fine, however scattered rain this evening and overnight. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland rain with heavy falls, easing from the south today. Fine tomorrow apart from isolated showers. Canterbury and Otago. Scattered rain spreading north this afternoon, then clearing overnight. Fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers from the afternoon. For Southland, scattered showers mainly about the coast, and for the Chatham Islands, a few showers with a period of rain tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it is 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you so much, Anna Thomas. A busy 20 minutes or so between now and 6:30, so let's get on with it. Thank you everyone for being with us. The ministerial portfolios for the government have been dished out and the new ministers will begin being officially briefed on their new roles tomorrow once they've been sworn in. We've got a special program tomorrow night too. The team that will run the country is a mix of ministers from Labour, New Zealand First and the Greens. Today the Prime Minister-designate, Jacinda Ardern, spoke about the government's portfolios, their priorities and reducing child poverty, she says, is chief among them.
It's a personal priority for me, a commitment for me, one of the reasons I am in politics. Cabinet Office advice, of course, was that holding an operational portfolio like the children's portfolio simply wasn't possible, something that I too had come to terms with. I did not want to relinquish, however, the strong focus I want this government to maintain on child poverty, so I will ensure that focus remains by holding responsibility for child poverty reduction. I've otherwise asked that Tracy Martin take on the role as Minister for Children. She's a strong advocate in that area. She has a strong focus on education in particular. I believe she has the strength to make sure Oranga Tamariki is an effective and successful ministry.
Now, Ms Ardern says addressing housing is also a huge focus for the new government, and she's brought it back into one portfolio after the national government split it between 3 different ministers.
Our desire, our belief that home ownership should not be out of reach of New Zealanders means that Phil Twyford will be taking on Minister for Housing and Urban Development. That portfolio brings in what had become quite a disparate set of portfolios. It's our belief that by working as a single entity, we'll make sure there are greater efficiencies and better planning across those portfolios.
That's Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand First Leader, now Deputy Prime Minister. Well, he will be tomorrow after the swearing in. Winston Peters spoke today about his party's cabinet postings and was asked what he will bring as he returns to the Foreign Affairs Minister role.
Well, I think I can bring to Foreign Affairs a thing called experience, which is rather important on the international scene. The last time I had the job, I spent a lot of time to turn around our relationship with the United States, and I think even our worst critics would acknowledge we were successful in doing that, but also to expand our understanding of, for example, the East Asian relationship, which was beginning at that time. And there are a number of things internationally which I think New Zealand has got a capability of having a strong voice on, even to the extent of we do not think that North Korea is an utterly hopeless case. We do not think, for example, that China is the reason why. We need to better understand that region and make our contribution, albeit as a small country, but an informed one.
Winston Peters, the climate change portfolio, conservation, women's affairs are among the 10 Green Party portfolios, well, associates, that the Greens have been given. Its leader James Shaw says his MPs are delighted.
It does give us a tremendous opportunity to work on the areas that we campaigned on in climate change, in relation to the 3,000 species that are facing extinction. They will now have a fighting chance, I think. In relation to people facing domestic and sexual violence, they will have someone to fight their corner in a way that I don't think that we've seen before. In relation to health and to a long-standing commitment to transforming the way that New Zealand gets around and our transport, obviously that's really significant for us as well.
That's Green Party leader and new Climate Change and Statistics Minister James Shaw, who, by the way, nailed the top dad joke of the day when he was asked about having the statistics portfolio. He said, it's the only one that counts. Grown. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has 28 new ministers, including 20 in Cabinet and 8 outside. Now, producer Bridget Burke spoke to 4 of them who will hold key portfolios in the next government about what they'd like to change and what they hope to achieve over the next 3 years.
Andrew Little, Minister of Justice, Minister for the Security Agencies, Minister of Treaty Negotiations. and Minister in charge of the Pike River recovery. I'm really excited to be rising to a number of challenges that we're going to have in justice. There's issues about the family court, there's issues about access to justice generally. My undertaking to Tana Porter and his team, and indeed to New Zealand, is we will get that sorted as quickly as we can. I've seen the High Court decision about the inflation adjustment of his compensation. I think that is a perfectly reasonable decision and set of principles, and we ought to just apply it and get on with it. 19 or 20 odd years in prison for a crime he clearly did not commit. He should be compensated properly for that, and it's not right to apply a compensation formula that's 17 years old. It ought to be adjusted. I want to get on and do that. Pike River, I've had a long-standing personal and deep commitment to Pike River, seeing justice for those families, and I'm honoured to have that role and to work with those families to achieve a just outcome. On treaty negotiations, there's one large treaty negotiation left to deal with. It's in Ngāpui. It's probably one of the most difficult. The huge number of people we are sending to prison, we've got to work out a better way that people both are called to account, but we're not spending a fortune on banging people up in prison. There's an issue about drug law reform. I'm really keen and eager to work with the Minister of Health, David Clark, in getting to grips with that issue. The Canterbury Earthquakes Insurance Tribunal set up as quickly as we can. That's got to be done. That's just about treating people with dignity and fairness and getting their long-standing claims sorted out.
My name is Campbell, and I have recently been made the Minister for Social Development, the Minister for Disability Issues, Associate Minister for Pacific Peoples, and Associate Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage. I guess with regards to social development, I've got a real focus on upskilling and training for people that find themselves in periods of unemployment. I want to make sure that families are actually better off when they go off the benefit, not just off the benefit. So our focus will be on supporting upskilling and training. I really want to focus too on improving the culture of work and income New Zealand officers because I hear from New Zealanders all the time about the negative experience that they've had, and these are New Zealanders who are senior citizens, some who are New Zealanders with disabilities, some who are single parents with children, a range of New Zealanders. And I really want to improve that experience because people deserve to be treated with respect and dignity when they are seeking support from government agencies.
Willie Jackson, Minister for Employment and Associate Minister for Māori Development. This is a great opportunity, real honour. What I'm really looking forward to is supporting young people. Young people need investment and support. Our people, working class people of all races, need dignity and they need respect and they need security. And I come from a background and have a history where we fought for this. And this casualisation in terms of the different industries, people not knowing whether they've got a job from 1 week to the next, it's got to be looked at, and it'll be a particular focus of mine as I get into this new and exciting portfolio. And in terms of Māori development, I'm honoured to be 2IC or Associate Minister to the first Māori woman development or Māori Affairs Minister in the history of New Zealand politics, Nanaia Mahuta, and I'm really looking to get my teeth into that work also right across the Māori development spectrum.
Kia ora, Nanaia Mahuta. I'm the newly appointed Minister for Māori Development and Local Government, looking forward to the challenge. And there are a lot of challenges in front of us, but I'm really excited to be a part of this Labour coalition government led by Jacinda Ardern. I think the issues are fairly direct and important and will make a big impact on all New Zealanders. Reducing poverty and inequality affects everybody, but more importantly for Māori, ensuring that we can lower some of the negative aspects that are affecting our people, the difficulty in buying and finding affordable homes, improving educational achievement, optimising the use of Māori land, and being able to ensure that in a post-settlement treaty space, Māori are able to actively engage in lifting economic opportunity, which will improve regional economic growth. So there are huge opportunities and there are significant challenges. But I know that when people went to the polling booth and voted for change, they voted for a different way of doing things. And we're bringing a lot of energy into this conversation about how we can do things differently so that everybody benefits. So I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Nānai Mahuta talking to our producer Bridget Burke, ending that package put together by Bridget, talking to incoming Cabinet Ministers. Now, part of the government's policy platform is, of course, to increase the hourly rate of the minimum wage from $15.75 up to $20 within the next 3 years. Some support the increase, others say it could put them off hiring young workers with no experience. Others say they can't afford it. Bridget Mills spoke to small business owners in West Auckland.
Along the semi-industrial streets of New Lynn, a hodgepodge mix of retailers, factories, mechanics and cafes operate side by side. At a popular cafe tucked off the main strip, owner Jacob tells me he's nervous about the rise of the minimum wage.
Because we operate a fairly low margin business, and so that just bites directly into our margins, and there's only so much people are willing to pay for things. So our business may slightly shrink if we have to put our prices up, but then also our costs are going up, so when we're stuck in the middle.
He says raising the price of coffee is one option, but he's reluctant to push the price of a latte over the $5 mark. One way to help his business would be to have a lower youth wage.
We take on a lot of people who are at school and they have no experience, and we invest a lot in them to get them experience. So someone who's like coming in from school, jumping in the dishes, like I washed dishes when I was at school, I know my wife did. You learn how a business works and you gain that experience, and I kind of think that if the wage just goes up for those kind of people, then you're not really going to be looking at those type of people, you're going to be looking at people who have experience.
Along the street at Mag and Turbo Warehouse, owner Anthony Saunders is rushed off his feet. He has 3 full-time staff, but finding the right person isn't always easy.
In this specific industry, a lot don't make it. They just don't have the skills and more the mental maturity, I guess you might say. They just come in and think it's still lunchtime at high school. They're not worth $20 an hour at all. You've got holiday pay on top of that, and all of a sudden for a small business that doesn't make huge amounts of profit, that's actually quite a large burden.
Anthony Saunders says he'd like to pay staff as much as possible, but only if they add to the productivity of the business.
How do I dangle the carrot and go, well, look, you work harder, you're more productive, the business is more profitable, it can pay you more, it's that simple, and I want to do that. I want to have staff here, I don't want to have any staff turnover, I want to turn up on time and, and do their job and everyone's happy. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way.
But for some, it does work that way. Down the road at the Sleep Store, all 16 employees are paid the living wage, which is currently more than $20 an hour. Louise Tangay owns the online retail shop. She says businesses need to be supportive of their staff.
If you're running your business at a level that can only justify paying people $15, then you need to make some changes to the business. We have good steady growth in our business, and our staff are a key part of that. We have excellent staff, and if you pay your staff better, you can attract better staff, which helps you grow and helps you become a more profitable business. So I can't see any downside at all in paying people properly.
The new government is aiming to get the minimum wage to $20 an hour by 2021, though, as Louise points out, the actual living wage will likely be higher than that by then. In Auckland for Checkpoint, this is Bridget Mills.
Look, if you had one shot.
We return now to M&M, the National Party and the High Court in Wellington. Did the National Party breach copyright with their use of a piece of production music in the 2014 election campaign ad that sounded strikingly like the M&M song Lose Yourself? Yes, says the High Court. The penalty is $600,000, which is arguably cheap, given it won an Academy Award. A Grammy Award, went to #1 in the US, stayed top 10 for 12 months and has sold roughly 12 million copies. But National argued they bought the production music in good faith, believing they were entitled to use it. They are now going after the people they bought it from. The High Courts, well, are not persuaded. Now, James Boyle is a professor of law and co-founder for the study of the public domain at Duke Law School. Public domain is what this is all about. Today's High Court decision references his work, Theft, A History of Music, which is a comic that lays out 2,000 years of musical history in which he deals with the idea of borrowing music. It's available online. It's a really good watch. I asked him if he was remotely surprised by the High Court's decision.
Well, you could take 2 points of view on this. On the one hand, you could say, of course, this is blindingly obvious. I mean, they called it Eminem-esque, or, according to John Oliver, Eminem-esque, which is his version of a New Zealand accent. You can judge whether or not that's actually accurate.
Not bad.
It had... thank you so much. It had exactly the doom, 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 doom. I mean, this is exactly the same. It's obviously aimed at the same thing. It's called after the same thing. And then they have the gall to come in and say, oh, no, this isn't copyright infringement. And you can see why Eminem and 8 Mile Productions were outraged. On the other hand, if you were the National Party, you might say, wait a minute. These are, first of all, just 2 chords. Dum, 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 dum. Since when does Eminem own those 2 chords? This is completely unoriginal. Copyright only covers original stuff. What's more, there's nothing in this that really rises to the level of creativity in what we took, not in the song as a whole, but in what we took. There's nothing convoluted in here like Eminem's famous Mother's Spaghetti. Rather, it's just this repetitive chord change and some rather uninspiring political advertising. So, at worst, we're kind of bad hacks who make it clear that we bought a sound-alike track we thought were licensed, but we're certainly not copyright infringers. Copyright doesn't reach this far, and if it does, then it covers everything. It covers the 12-bar blues, it covers the 1-4-5 chord sequence, it covers perfect fifths. This is just a basic chord change. So both sides had an argument. Justice Cole wrote an extremely thoughtful opinion, which I've spent all of 25 minutes dealing with as an excellent legal academic. It's really well done. It's really careful. She makes a very good case. I'm not an expert in New Zealand copyright law. She makes a very good case. This is infringement. I have some quibbles, which I'd be happy to go over with you. I'm actually secretly delighted she cited our comic book on the history of musical borrowing. That just made my day. But it seems to me this is an unsurprising result, but it wasn't that the National Party didn't have an argument. They did.
Yes, and I want to come back to that because the National Party paid $4,800 to purchase production music. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that no one in the National Party at that stage, certainly who was involved in the purchase of this, had any idea who Eminem was. So in good faith, they go to a production house. The production house says, hey, this is kind of zeitgeist stuff. And so they say, yep, we love it, we'll have it. Why isn't the production company being sued?
Now, that's something that's a matter of New Zealand law, collateral vicarious liability, all kinds of things in which I have absolutely no expertise, possibly because they had an indemnity from the party, who knows. I think the clearer examples, they say, oh, come on, you bought a track called Eminem-esque and you're claiming you didn't know it involved Eminem. That strikes me as a dog that doesn't hunt. I mean, that's a ludicrous claim. What instead I think they could have claimed and did claim is, look, we were told that this was just a sound-alike track, and these are routine in the media business. People buy tracks. Give me one that sounds like a reggae track. Give me one that sounds like an old hard rock track, vaguely Stones-ish, vaguely Beatles-ish, and people make a lot of money doing this. And the question is, how close to that line do you get to get?
Yeah, I want to go back to you singing those 2 chords, because when you did those 2 chords, can you do them again? Because I don't want to ruin the program by doing them myself. Can you give us your 2 chords? It was beautiful.
Dum, 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 dum. So here's the problem, and here's the one place where I might gently perhaps critique the court's opinion. So the court is very impressed by how much work was put in on all of this. And oh my goodness, they spent, a year and a half figuring all this out, and they won all these awards, which shows how original it is. Now, that last comment is just a non sequitur. I mean, take a perfect fifth. Dum 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 dum. Apologies to your listeners for my tone deafness, but most of you are sitting out there going, "Oh yeah, that's that Steely Dan song, Ricky Don't Lose That Number," except for those of you who are jazz fans and are going, "Oh yeah, that's that Horace Silver song, a Song from My Father." Both of those won awards. Both of them used that interval. And the fact that they won awards doesn't mean that either of them owns dum-dum, 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 dum-dum. That's just a perfect fit. That's a standard interval in music. You don't get to own it. The National Party was trying to claim this was true. On the other hand, just as Carl rightly pointed out, there were lots of other things in the composition, the way that the guitar chords were played, the way that it was accented, subtle differentiation, stress on the third beat, all of which was designed very specifically to in the original and which the National Party copied. And she thought that was original enough to qualify for copyright protection under New Zealand law, and I have to defer to her on that.
James Boyle, deferring to the High Court judge. Fascinating subject, this one. James did want to stress that he's not an expert on New Zealand copyright law, that in fact his area of expertise and interest is English copyright law and American copyright law. Nonetheless, the Nats have to pay $600,000, although now they're saying to the production company, hold on a sec, you pay it. It's really interesting. It's not as if they pinched, the production company pinched, they appropriated, they borrowed a song that wasn't well known. If you're not an Eminem fan, you need to know that lots of people are. It went to #1 in Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, New Zealand. Yes, it went #1 here. In fact, it went double platinum here. Norway, Spain, Switzerland, UK, the United States, where it sold 7 or 8 million copies. It was a mega smash hit that the National Party's production company helped themselves to. Lots of feedback coming in tonight. Does it strike anyone as ironic that the party that persecuted Kim.com for copyright infringement has been found guilty of copyright crime? I would like to see Bill English challenged every time he states 44.5% of the vote was for National. The media never reports that 55.5% of the vote wasn't. It's called MMP, and I can scarcely believe how excited and energised I am by this government. If they can achieve a third of what they're aiming for, I'll be thrilled. I'll pay more tax, I don't care. This is what I've been waiting for. I feel like I've been holding my breath for years, says Margaret. Well, they get sworn in tomorrow and we have a very special program tomorrow night. Join us then, we hope. See you tomorrow at 5.
The National Party is vowing to sue the company that provided Eminem's music for its 2014 election campaign ad. The party's been ordered to pay $600,000 in damages to the rapper's publisher for breaching copyright. The incoming Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, is confident there's enough money for the new government's ambitious program, despite restated doubts from National Stephen Joyce, who he says is confused. The lawyer for the convicted double murderer David Tamahiri says he will be approaching the new Prime Minister to ask for a pardon. The owners of 17 Caltex stations have been reprimanded for underpaying hundreds of workers. And the Southern DHB is holding 2 mega clinics to clear its backlog of urology patients. Our next news and weather is at 7.
The Gershwins, George and Ira, are responsible for dozens of great tunes.